Not long after I returned to the Catholic Church, something visited me in the night. I felt hands laying upon my shoulder blades, and my body reacted negatively at first. I didn't know who or what this was, but the presence encouraged me to relax and simply let her work. She moved systematically, identifying places where I was stuck, where energy wasn't flowing, where old wounds had calcified into blockages. She told me my heart was aligned, that it represented the role I was meant to fulfill, but it couldn't flow properly because other things were in the way. I spoke too much, she said, particularly about politics. It was disconnecting me from people I might otherwise be able to help. I was holding on to an image of a role I wasn't called to fulfill. I had isolated myself out of fear that I wasn't enough for the people who needed me. And then she touched my forehead, the place that had been broken since Okinawa, since the sacred tree at Kadena, since Spencer blasted Reiki through it and Holden had to shove him off me, the place that made me dizzy when people pointed at it, the place Rachel would switch in to protect, or at least that's what I thought. This began the night of your encounter with the angel, she said. You've been afraid ever since. Afraid of what you saw, afraid of what you're capable of spiritually. That fear has lived here for 20 years. I'd always traced what I called the third eye problems to Okinawa, to the tree, but she was right. The root went deeper, all the way back to that night when I was 16, standing outside my own body, facing a being shrouded in darkness who showed me visions I never asked to see. I had been terrified of my own spiritual capacity ever since, terrified of what I might do, what I might see, what I might become. You aren't wrong to be afraid of what he revealed that night, she continued, but your understanding has grown significantly since then. As you have worked through his truths and gained insights into how to approach these things more responsibly, this has improved. That's why you haven't had the instinctive need to shut down unless someone pours too much energy into you. When I thought about it, she was right. Right about that too. The passing out, the dizziness, it had lessened over the years. I just hadn't connected it to my own growth. And then she said 3 words I had heard before while I read The Wounded Healer in the church when I thanked Mary. Stop and listen. 3 times now, the same message from a book, from my own heart, and now from this being in the night. When she finished her work, I felt something I hadn't felt in that place since I was 16 years old. Relief. Just relief. No fear. Not the instinct to shut down, not the need for Rachel to take over and protect. A few weeks later, I was at a pancake breakfast in the church. I ended up sitting with a couple who were visiting, trying to just figure out if they wanted to go to a Protestant church or a Catholic church, and they were just exploring different churches in the area to see what fit. We got to talking about faith and about journeys, about how we each ended up where we were. The woman shared that she had her own encounter with an angel, and the angel had told her she needed to stop judging people. I thought, well, here's someone who might understand, someone who's had a supernatural experience, someone maybe I could talk to about this. So I opened up. I told her a bit about my story, about the online community I was still part of, and the one that collected people from all kinds of spiritual backgrounds. Christians, pagans, seekers of all kinds. The community that had been a lifeline for me for over a decade, and ultimately helped me back into the Catholic faith. Her demeanor shifted. What could you possibly learn from that community, she asked, that you couldn't learn from the Bible? Her husband agreed, and I tried to explain. There's some things the Bible doesn't directly address. Practical wisdom about how to help people without becoming a liability yourself. Like, if you want to fight fires, you need to have the proper protective gear. Otherwise, you're not a rescuer. You're just another victim. If hospitals get overcrowded, efficiency drops, and people who really need help can't get it. You can't be reckless in how you help others. She didn't receive that well. I think partially in part because she herself was disabled, and she took my words as commentary on her rather than the principle I was trying to communicate. But the larger issue was clear. She couldn't accept that wisdom might exist outside the pages of Scripture. The irony wasn't lost on me. An angel had told her to stop judging people, and here she was judging me for the community I was part of, for suggesting that God might teach us things through experiences and people beyond the Bible. My community had taught me compassion for others' beliefs and the role of free will. Because of my own journey, I could understand her apprehension. I left that pancake breakfast with a strange clarity. If I had been someone else, someone earlier in my journey, this interaction might have driven me away from the church entirely. I'd encountered this before, actually. So many people who walked away from God because his followers didn't reflect his values. The logic kind of goes, if people who claim to follow this theology don't actually live it out, the theology must not be worth pursuing. But my years in that online community had taught me something crucial. You're not supposed to be looking at the other people. You're supposed to be looking at what the theology actually says and trying to integrate that. People, even yourself, will always fail. They'll judge you when they've been told not to judge. They'll exclude when they've been told to be welcoming. They'll speak when they've been told to listen. That's not an indictment of the theology. That's an indictment of our humans' inability to live up to it. It is a human thing, and it's what makes Christ's enduring patience all that more awe-inspiring. And I realized something else. The entity who had visited me weeks before had said my own understanding had grown, that I had worked through the angel's truths and gained insight into a more responsible approach. This is what she meant. I could sit across from a woman who judged me for my path, and instead of letting it shake my faith, I could see it for what it was. A human, just like I did, failing to live up to divine instruction. Just like I had failed over and over and over again. Just like we all fail. The theology wasn't wrong. We're just still learning how to walk it out. About a month later, I woke up on a Sunday morning and I got in my car to drive to Mass. But as I started to pull out of the parking lot, something felt, wrong about driving this direction. Not wrong, just different. Like I wasn't supposed to go where I usually went. Tried to shake it off. I knew the route. I knew the church. I'd been attending there since I came back to Catholicism, though I wasn't fully a returned Catholic. I was still trying to work out what that looked like if I had to go to catechism and all that stuff. But the feeling got stronger, so strong that I pulled into a parking lot and stopped. I sat there, confused. Was God telling me to go somewhere else? I mean, I had found a church. Wasn't that enough? Then I realized I had gone to go fish out my rosary before leaving the house, and that was odd too. I didn't usually bring it to Mass. I'm still having difficulty with saying the rosary, I still didn't know where to place Mary. I still don't. I had to just sit there and think about what it meant that I was picking this up to. So I pulled out my phone and I started searching for nearby Catholic churches. Our Lady of the Rosary popped up. I looked at my rosary, I looked at the screen, and the connection seemed fairly obvious. Then I looked at the Mass times. The next one wasn't until 11 a.m. Yeah, no, I thought. That's too late. So I kept searching. I found another church with a 9 a.m. Mass. Close enough. I could make it. So I drove there, still wondering if I was being foolish. I walked into this new church and sat down for Mass. At this time, I started wondering if I was actually supposed to go to Our Lady of the Rosary. Maybe that's the thought that I was supposed to have, so that when the words came, I would understand, really understand that I was in the right place. The priest began his homily. "We travel to new places," he said, "with the expectation of new opportunities." And I sat straight up and really listened. The reading that day was about Christ calling Simon and Andrew to follow him, to become fishers of men. And as the priest discussed the historical context, what fisher of men would have meant to the people of that time, I saw the fisherman in my mind, more vivid than I'd seen him in years. The amphitheater, the water, the fishing line cast where there were no fish, flashes of the dreams played through my memory. All of those people connected to suicide, gathering in the pooling water, and me, standing between them and the fishermen, never understanding why I was there, because I definitely did not want to die. So that question surfaced, the one that I never really thought to ask someone else about, but I kept it to myself. Why suicidal people? I wasn't suicidal. I had never been suicidal. So why was I always in that dream, surrounded by people who wanted to die? And something clicked. The fisherman wasn't just waiting for me. He was waiting for all of them too, casting his line into the water with no fish, because the fish hadn't chosen to be caught yet. They were still deciding whether to live or die, whether to grab the line or slip beneath the surface. It also occurred to me that Moonshadow had become Catholic later in life. Maybe he caught her too, though I wonder if she ever knew it. We've never talked about this. He was offering them an opportunity, a reminder that by choosing to live, they could pursue something more. But if they chose death, wherever they were in that moment would be their final decision. Still, I was there because, what? Sure, he was trying to catch me, but if he was trying to catch suicidal fish, I'm not suicidal. So, with that realization that I didn't have all the answers, I felt like maybe I needed to talk to the priest. After Mass, the crowd thinned, and I was just sitting there talking with God. I had actually asked him to give me the courage to go talk to him. And then I thought, no, it's not going to work out. It'll be fine. I noticed the priest was greeting parishioners as they left, which was something that the previous church didn't quite do. The father just kind of walked off. So I thought, Father, you're really opening this door. Maybe I shouldn't have asked for it. I almost left. Found an excuse to slip out before I got too far into a conversation I wasn't sure I was ready to have. I started talking with the priest, but when someone came up to talk to him, I was like, no, okay, never mind. You can have that conversation. And when I started to pull away, the priest noticed. He insisted that he was talking with me now, that we could continue the conversation. I got caught in the net, so to speak. I asked him about the dream, about why I might have been placed among the suicidal people when I'd never been suicidal myself. Now, he did tell me the church doesn't interpret dreams, but then he offered a possibility anyway. Something to think about, something that gave me a new angle to consider. I left that church, turning the homily over in my mind, turning his words over, turning 20 years of dreams over, and then I wondered, maybe the reason I didn't get the acknowledgement I was looking for right away at the first parish was because I didn't actually belong to that parish, just the faith. Maybe God had been waiting to give me the person acknowledging my presence for the right opportunity. Maybe the first parish was just a stepping stone, a place to say thank you, to realize I hadn't been listening and to understand that the Catholic Church was home, but maybe not my specific home. So I decided I was going to lean in on that and went exploring other parishes. It took some exploration, some visits, some sitting with the feeling to make sure it was real and not just the excitement of a new place. The second parish, the one with the priest and the homily, advertised a women's conference. So
I attended, and I made the prayer request while we were there for a revelation on which parish God wanted me to attend. Incidentally, I should also note that Bible study group I had been part of, one of the women that was in there, I saw her at that conference, which just reaffirmed more that I was in the right place. Anyways, the answer came in the form of everyone else talking about how their decisions all seemed to line up with the presence of a saint. So, during breaks, I looked into different saints of the parishes I had felt most called to. Eventually, I felt certain the saint that fit my story the best was the one I visited that day when I felt pulled to a different parish. The one with the priest and the homily. That was where God wanted me. The next step, well, that was confession. Because as a returning Catholic, I needed to set things right. I had intended to go on a particular week, actually, but something came up and a friend needed me, and I chose to be there for her instead. So I pushed confession off to the following Saturday. And when I finally went, I sat down with the priest. I confessed my sins, the years of wandering, the gods I had followed, the mistakes I made, all of it as briefly as I could so I didn't take up other people's time. And when I finished, the priest said something that made me catch my breath. I'm reminded of the story we spoke of in today's Mass, he said, of the prodigal son's return. I hadn't attended Mass that day. I had only come in for confession. But somehow the reading had been about the prodigal son, and somehow this priest saw that story in me. The son who took his inheritance and squandered it in a far country, who fed pigs and longed to eat their food, who finally came to his senses and returned home, hoping to be accepted as a servant. And the father, who saw him coming from a long way off, who ran to meet him, who didn't make him grovel or prove himself, who threw a feast and said, "This son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." For more than 20 years I had wandered through the astral plane and paganism, through military service and sacred ceremonies, through Okinawa and Hawaii and cockroach-infested trailers, through cancer and fractured friendships, gods who taught me forgiveness so I could find my way back to the God who had been awaiting all along, the God of gods, our Father, in heaven. And now, finally, I was home. Not just home in the Catholic Church, home in my parish, home in the confessional, home in the arms of a Father who had been watching me from a long way off. The Fisherman had caught me at last. I am Alethea, and this is Wandering Sinai.